Okay, welcome back to the Online Writing Center's Knowledge is Power Hour, Mastering Microsoft Word. Today's topic is on optimizing self-editing tools. Specifically, we're going to talk about font style and size, line spacing, compressing images for a manageable file size, updating grammar and spell check options to adhere to APA, and also changing sentence case to title case and vice versa, which is often something we need to do in our reference lists. So I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint and bring up the sample paper that we have been using for these sessions. Apologize, just 1 second. Okay, so we're going to go through, I'm not going to go through quite in order, as I just mentioned, because I've brought up my document and I do have an image here. So I'm going to start with how you compress an image files or when it's in your document so that your document file size doesn't get too big. When you have a number of images, whether this is copying and pasting as an image, something from SPSS, as you see here, a graph, or an image, any type of image. Some images can be inserted and really enhance the file size of your document. So when you're beginning to email your dissertation or any other document back and forth with a faculty member, with an outside reader trying to upload it, that file size can be too big. So you want to make sure that your images are compressed so that the exchanging of that document isn't hindered by its file size. To do this, it's fairly easy. You're going to click on the image itself. That's going to select it. You'll see here a few menu options. Layout options are going to pop up. We're not worried about the layout right now. What we're looking to do is actually come up to the top of the page and click on picture format. And then under the adjust options here on the top of the page, you want to click on compress picture. Okay, and this is going to bring up a few options for you. You can apply it only to this picture. If you unselect that though, you can apply it to all of the images in your document, or you can do one image at a time. If you've cropped, you can delete any cropped areas from there. So you'll see here, use default resolution is what's selected. I recommend that you use the email to minimize the document size for sharing. So that's really the goal here, is that we're trying to minimize our file size to make sure that we can easily send it back and forth from person to person and or upload it where it needs to be uploaded. And then you would click OK. And that's it. That is how you are going to compress your file size or your image size so that your file size doesn't get too big. And again, you can do that to a single picture at a time or to all of the pictures at once in your document. Okay, so I'm going to come back up to the top of my page to my document now. So remember, this is a sample dissertation that we're looking at, and we've gone through in these Word sessions, updating this document for how it needs to look for the 7th edition. I'm going to talk a little bit about line spacing and spacing after a paragraph. So we want the document, this is per APA as well as per the Chicago School guidelines, you want the document to be double spaced. So all of your line spacing should be double spaced throughout. The only exception to that, as we mentioned in the last session, is in tables and figures. You can single space text in tables and figures if it makes that table or figure more readable. But everything else should be double spaced. That includes the title page, the abstract, the table of contents, and your reference list as well. I do recommend too, anytime you're manipulating your formatting in a document, that you want to come to this home tab and turn on the show hide function. Just as a reminder, the show hide shows you everywhere you have manually inserted formatting into your document. So that icon there, it's a paragraph icon, also called a Pilcrow icon, shows everywhere you've hit the enter key on your keyboard, just to give you an idea there. So you should be able to see your page breaks and everything. So you want to make sure, because we do want the entire document to be double spaced, one option is from your home menu to select the entire document, to come into your paragraph menu and make sure that the line spacing is set to double. However, I know that this manuscript has a number of tables in it, so I'm not necessarily going to do that because then I'll have to go back to each of those tables and respace them. What I recommend you do instead of that is that you set these spacing options before, and then when you are inserting tables, you can adjust those. Either way works. If you do have to do a little bit of adjusting of those tables, that's also not the end of the world. So we do want double spacing. You want to make sure too, where it says spacing, and you see this before and after, you want to make sure that that is set to 0 throughout the entire document. Otherwise, you're going to start to see places where there's a little bit of extra white space where we don't need it. So remember, you want it to be standard double spacing throughout. So 0, 0, and then you click that double, and then you would click OK. Again, I'm not actually going to execute that here because the document is already double spaced. But remember, your spacing before and after needs to be set to 0, and you want it to be double spaced throughout. The only exception is your tables and figures. Okay, so that has now been done. Another thing you want to keep an eye out. So in addition to that line spacing, in APA style, in the 7th edition, they've also changed the rules so that you need to have just a single space after each period. So it used to be, if you see here, I want you to look where it says relational frame theory and then the 6 processes of ACT. If you notice, there's a single dot here. So that indicates that there's only one space, which is correct. So in this document, the student has spaced their sentences correctly. But sometimes, if we're in the habit of having 2 spaces in, I'm going to just add them in here for the sake of example. So let's just say throughout the document, we had been using 2 spaces after a period. Just that, a lot of us learn to type that way. It's very common, and it's hard to turn off that sort of automatic muscle response when you're hitting 2 spaces after a period. So I wouldn't worry about it too much because there's actually a really easy way to fix for this. Okay, so I've added a few sentences, some double spacing. So let's just pretend for the sake of example, every sentence in the document had 2 spaces. So now we have to go through and eliminate that extra space. Don't worry, this is really easy. You can do it in a matter of seconds. So again, we're on our home tab. Now we're going to come up under the editing options. We're going to hit replace, and I'm going to say find what, and I'm going to hit my space bar twice. So see this, we're finding 2 spaces, and then replace with, and I'm going to hit my space bar just once. So find what, put your cursor there and hit your space bar twice, replace with, put your cursor here and hit your space bar once, and then click replace all. And now it is going to go through. So there were 54 incidences in this document where there were 2 spaces instead of 1. And so it just automatically, in a matter of less than a second, replaced all of them. So even if you have 3,000 sentences, it'll do those 3,000 replacements in about a second. Click OK, and then you close that. And now we've corrected for that rule throughout the entire document. So that's a trick. I mean, that's a great trick, that find and replace option, great trick for a lot of different rules. For example, let's say that you had forgotten that with a source that has 3 or more authors, that you can abbreviate that source. And so throughout this citation was written out like this. We could also I could copy and paste that. And say that we want Microsoft Word to find that string of text and that we want to replace it with, with the abbreviated version. Okay, and we could hit replace all. So in this case, there were 2. So it went through. So this is a time saver. So as you're doing the self-editing process for formatting APA style rules, use that find and replace function to your benefit. So you don't necessarily have to go through and make all of these tiny little edits throughout the entire document. And just a reminder, in this document, you can see the student would still need to update for that 7th edition rule where you get to abbreviate all citations that have 3 or more authors. So bonus little APA rule for you there. So let's talk now, continuing on with this APA. Another great tool that you can use for your self-editing is to use the options menu to set when Microsoft Word tells you that you've violated an APA or a grammar rule. We all know that in Microsoft Word, when you see red squiggly lines like that, it indicates what Microsoft Word thinks is a spelling error. If it's not, and those red lines bother you, one, you could turn them off, or you can just add something to your dictionary. So you can just say, you know what, that actually is the correct spelling. So I would like Microsoft Word to remember that. And now it's not going to flag those as incorrect. So what I did was I right clicked on the name. So I found that red squiggly line. So in this case, diffusion, that's a word that Microsoft Word is not recognizing, but it is the standard spelling of that word in this discipline. So I'm not going to tell Microsoft Word to ignore it, because I want Microsoft Word to remember that this is a word that I'm going to be using in my writing. So I right clicked on it and then click add to dictionary. So now Microsoft Word is going to remember that word. Sometimes you see blue lines too. So blue lines are what indicate grammar rules. Sometimes they're correct, sometimes they're not. So in this case, like sometimes Microsoft Word doesn't necessarily understand the context of a sentence. So just because you see that blue line doesn't necessarily mean you have an error. You really want to make sure that you double check the context of the sentence, that you are familiar with grammar rules yourself, so that you can discern, is that something that needs to be edited or is it not? And to help you in that process, you can, again, set up what Microsoft Word is actually flagging. So we're going to do that by clicking on our file option here. And at the very bottom, you see options. So we're going to click options. From here, you want to click on proofing, because proofing, that's what that is. Those red and blue lines under your words are a proofing. And then here you say, when correcting spelling and grammar in Word. So you see this highlighted heading here, when correcting spelling and grammar in Word, and these are the options. So you can have it, again, you can have it check spelling as you type or not. If that bothers you, you don't have to have it turned on. You can always turn it on after the fact when you're ready to go through the self-editing and proofing process. I personally like to have it on as I go. Same with grammar, you can have it mark it as you type or not. You can do it later. You can have it flag frequently confused words. You can have it recommend where on the page you want to see those recommendations. So there's a number of options. You can play around with all of these. But what I want to show you is if you click under writing style, and there's a few options, grammar and refinements or just grammar. I want you to click on, make sure it says grammar and refinements, and then click on settings. Now here is where you can customize, again, what Microsoft Word is showing you. So I want it, for example, to show me wordiness. So in APA, so this is an APA style. APA recommends, as we know, economy of expression, smoothness of expression. So that really means being as concise as possible and as clear as possible in our writing. So it is helpful to have Microsoft Word flag. And again, remember, it's not going to be perfect. No speller, grammar, Grammarly, none of these tools are perfect. However, having it flagged does help you double check and make you go back and reread that passage to make sure it is correct. So you want to have it checked for wordiness, words that express uncertainty. That's a good one because that might be something that's not as clear as it could be in your writing. Formality. So we want to make sure we're flagging colloquial phrases, contractions. We can't use contractions in our academic, informal. Opinion markers, prepositions at the end of the clause, slang. So these are all things that APA recommends we avoid in our academic writing. So we might as well have Microsoft Word, to the best of its ability, tell us if these are present in our writing. You can even have it check for inclusiveness and bias. Remember, this isn't perfect, but I do recommend let's have it check for all of these. Punctuation errors. So we want it, so the Oxford comma, that's what Microsoft Word calls it. That is the serial comma rule in Microsoft Word. So you do want to make sure it's checking to have that. Make sure you have your Oxford comma in there. Check if there's unnecessary commas, superfluous, vague verbs. Cliches, yep, I think that's a good one to check. Conventional or local specific, so this is like jargon, colloquialisms. Right, so you can go through, I mean, if you want to just check it all and see what happens, you can do that. You can play around with it a little bit. So I have almost all of the standard grammar rules checked in mine. Very specifically too, I want to make sure that you have the passive voice checked on here because Microsoft Words, yep, so jargon, you want to have it checked for passive voice. If you can word something more simply, I think it's great to see that recommended. So now we'll do okay. We're going to click okay. All right, so now, I mean, this document is a fairly well-written document. So not much more has been flagged than already was flagged in this document. If you notice here, though, these blue lines are showing us. And so if you click on it, it's going to say a simpler word here would be clearer for your reader. All right, and that's true. I mean, it's not wrong the way the student has written it, but you know, it might be helpful to consider. Can I make my sentence a little bit clearer? Right, so you can hear it saying that this is a little wordy. Right. So again, this is just a helpful tool. If you find it distracting, I recommend not having any of these rules turned on while you're actually writing. But you can turn them on when you're done with your writing, when again, you're in that self-editing and you're in that self-proofing process. Scroll down now to our reference list in this sample document. So here's an example. I just want to go back. Actually, I'm going to jump down. So this is one of the appendices of this dissertation. So here's an example in your appendices where you might have a number of images, right? And so I would definitely compress these images because this file, the file size of this particular document is quite large. So again, I'm going to compress that picture there. Just a reminder of that, to look for images throughout the document. Okay, here is our reference list. And the reference list here is formatted for the most part correctly. We do have some elements that are missing. We do have a number of APA style webinars and resources if you want to learn more about the nuances of reference list style. But what I really want to cover today, because we're talking about Microsoft Word tools, is how to change a title from sentence case to, from title case to sentence case, or from all caps into sentence case. And I'm not seeing an example of it in the paper, so I'll just pretend like the student had accidentally used title case. So title case means that each major word in the title is capitalized. We will use title case on the title page. So your dissertation title or your paper title should be in title case. However, in the reference list, the titles of our sources, so the title of the actual article, the title of the book, the title of the web page, these per APA need to be what's called sentence case. And in sentence case, we capitalize it like we would a sentence. So only the first word is capitalized. You will also capitalize the first word of a subtitle, as well as any proper noun. So there's only 3 things that are capitalized: the first word of the title, the first word of the subtitle, and then any proper nouns that are in that title. So in this case, the only 2 words that should be capitalized are beyond and addressing. So it can be really tedious to go through and have to hit your delete, hit your delete key and replace with the correctly capitalized letter. So what you can do instead is you can select this, and then you're going to hold down your shift key, and then you're going to hit F3. So at the top of your keyboard, you see those function keys. So you hold down your shift key and then hit F3. So notice the first thing it did was made it all caps. That's obviously not what we want. So I'm going to do it one more time. So again, hold down the shift key, press F3, and now it has brought it all to lowercase. So now all I have to do is correct 2 letters instead of all of the letters in the title. Okay, so here's an example. Well, actually, this one's correct because this is a proper noun. That's the title of a manual, but let's pretend, again, for the sake of demonstration, that it's not. So I'm hitting holding my shift key down and hitting F3. The first thing it does is capitalize it. So I need to hit it one more time. And now it's all lowercase. All right, that is all the tips for today's Microsoft Word session. If you have any questions, reach out to us at Online Writing Center at thechicagoschool.edu. Thanks for joining.